one thing that's interested me in as we sort of have this national debate over response is I hear from states sometimes that they felt like there was not enough of a national plan, and then I also hear that they weren't given the flexibility they needed to, say, do their testing planning the way they would have liked to. So as far as the state-federal response or relationship, are we still basically on the right track? What lessons can we learn, and what should be shifted in that relationship?
Having worked on both sides of this, I will tell you, I see the federal government as the rules, the tools, and the funding, and then states, territories, and tribes implement it to their specific constituencies. What works in Florida won't work in North Dakota, but we should be using the same standards and guidelines to implement those programs, giving flexibility to the governors and their teams for the implementation.
Would you say that's pretty, from my point of view, that seems to be how it's always supposed to have happened and how it basically has been happening now, obviously with some arguments here and there.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that I've heard calls for a federal czar to take over and run all this, and I would defer to that going, one person in D.C. is not going to be able to make this work, but we need to have consistent guidance on the federal side, consistent resources, so that states can implement this as it's best for the states.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. The Chair now recognizes the Chair of the Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the gentlelady from New Mexico. As the few games, it's once again good to see you. Always a pleasure. We appreciate your service to the country. It's been second to none. As we all have seen that year for disaster, do you believe that FEMA should retain lead of the federal government's response to coronavirus? Mr. Freeman? I found it fascinating when they put FEMA in that lead role, because if you think about FEMA, they're the ultimate support agency. Either we're supporting governors in their response, or we're supporting a lead federal agency that has jurisdiction. And in FEMA's history, this goes back to the Challenger disaster, where FEMA was in support of NASA. By putting FEMA in the lead role, I think we lost a lot of the expertise that CDC should have had, that FEMA could have supported. So I think FEMA's role as the nation's crisis manager should be enforced, but I think it should also be seen that we want to make sure that the lead agency jurisdiction, the legal authority, and the expertise are taking that lead, FEMA supporting it, and hopefully making it more successful. Thank you. Mr. Keller, do you think the same thing?
Yeah, I'll agree with Craig. I think that the topic here is that not necessarily FEMA being the lead agency, but being the lead coordination agency at the federal level. Obviously, much like we've done here in California, our Health and Human Services is the lead agency dealing with the pandemic, but my office is providing the overarching coordination. I bring all the other state agencies and departments together. I interface between the state and federal governments. I ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction so that we are not wasting time, that we're not stovepiped in our effort or in our commitment of resources. So that's really, I think, from the national perspective, FEMA brings a great role, and they understand emergencies on a national scale. They have relationships with all the state directors, and they go down to the local. All disasters are local, and we have to look at it from that perspective, how these events are impacting local governments and state governments. And so I think that FEMA's got that ability to look at the big picture and make sure that action plans and the direction of the federal government is in the best interest and support of state and local governments.
Thank you. Mr. Curry, what impact does constantly shifting responsibility for various response activities have on the federal government's ability to effectively manage a nationwide emergency?
Well, I think that roles and responsibilities being clear is critical in this case, and I think just to go off what some of the prior responses, to your questions. I think we were victims of past successes in other situations. Typically in situations like H1N1 and Ebola and Zika and everything we've had over the last 50 to 60 years, the HHS and CDC has been able to handle the response to those public health emergencies. And so because of that, the structures we have had in place to deal with public health emergencies and pandemics is focused on their role and their responsibilities, which is appropriate. They have the medical expertise necessary. But what's clear in this case is they did not have the logistical capability that was required in a large pandemic. So moving forward, I think the key is going to be to us to figure out what new structures and new processes and roles and responsibilities need to be in place to handle the rest of this pandemic, and hopefully we don't have one, but one in the future as well.
Thank you. Also, Mr. Curry, how do you think deficiencies hindered FEMA's ability to properly develop and execute procurement strategy for COVID-19, given scale staff's work on these issues? What is the number one outstanding recommendation you think that FEMA needs to address?
Well, a couple come to mind in this case. The first is, I'll throw out the contracting issue, which has been a huge challenge. Chairman Thompson pointed this out in his opening statement. After Hurricane Maria, we had challenges trying to fill needs for tarps and other things. So in a huge disaster, this is very typical where you've exhausted